In the last video, we showed how to create validations and then show the errors. Now we want to show those errors not in one big list at the bottom, but right by where the data is being inputted. So the name can't be blank validation error. We'd want to put right below name. And the two about the level, we would want to put right below the level. This is going to end up as a lot more code per input field. So way more than just one line, because we're going to have to put in a set of errors for each of those lines. So we'll want to have a component that encapsulates all this that we can reuse. So we'll generate a component called ValidatedInput. When we use ValidatedInput, we're going to be passing in two arguments. One is the label, and we'll just be taking this label that we've given it already. And then we'll be taking in the property name. And this one will be name. So this line will be replacing this big line plus a lot of other stuff. But first, let's just worry about replacing what we already have here before we talk about adding these errors. All right, so we'll go ahead and take this and put it in our ValidatedInput handlebars. So we'll have to make some changes here. We'll start with an easy one. This will be the property name here. Now we'll add the label, and this one's pretty easy. We just put it there ahead of our input field. And the next thing to add is changing this value property. So for this particular one that we took it from, it was the name property on changeset. And another way of writing that is like this, but it's not always going to be the name property. The property we passed in via property name, so that's how we make sure to get the correct value. And we're going to be doing the same thing here. Now we can look and see that here our name is still working. It's still being handled by changeset, and it'll still save. So our ValidatedInput component perfectly replicates what we had before. Now let's do this for the three other inputs. And sure enough, everything is showing up just like it was before. So we just saved a lot of code with this one component, and we haven't even started adding our main goal for today yet. That goal, of course, is for the errors to appear right next to where the input is rather than down below in one big group. So we're going to have to learn a little bit about the error singular object on ember-changeset. So the error singular has, instead of a property called key, it actually, in the hash, has a key with the key. So you can find what errors there are for each individual property. Let's go ahead and steal this little block of templating, and we're going to make it dynamic. So we'll put this, of course, below the one-way input. And our first order of business is to make this dynamic, the if statement. So instead of that, we'll be using the get helper, and instead of the first name, we'll be taking the property name. All right, so we've got that if helper under control. Let's go ahead and test it out. So we'll have that paragraph tag, and we'll just say, hey, if there's an error. Now let's go ahead and add errors to these, and sure enough, stuff is showing up. Now let's get the actual errors displaying instead of just hey. So what we'll do is use nested gets, because first we'll be getting the property. So we'll have a get here, but then we'll also need to get the validation of that. So we'll wrap this get in a sub-expression and then get the validation off of that. And of course we'll remove the hey. Now, there we go. That is pretty awesome. There are some styling issues. I mean, quite frankly, this doesn't look very good, but we'll leave that as an exercise to the reader since you probably didn't set yourself up with this ridiculous card format. So this is the gist of what we want. There are 3 issues with it though, and we'll tackle them in order of increasing difficulty. First, this stuff is still down at the bottom, and that is really, really easy to get rid of. We'll just remove some code. Awesome. So that problem is solved. The second is that these errors, if there are 2 showing up, are not formatted very well. That's because when we just display the validation without looping through them individually, it basically takes that array and it joins them with a comma. So we'll need to do an each statement here. So we will each over, and we'll make this a sub-expression so it'll fit inside the each. And now we'll have each individual error to work with. And we'll go ahead and make each error have its own paragraph. That might not be the best idea long term, but you'll get the idea. There we go. So they're both showing up and they're on different lines. And yeah, I'm thinking this paragraph thing was a really bad idea. Let's go ahead and just add a break tag before each one. Ah, that fits in much better with the rest of our styling. It's not saying it's good. The rest of our styling is pretty bad, but it fits in. So that solves the second problem. What's the third? Well, it's that, let's say we go to a monster that already has some data that now no longer fits in the validations. This would happen, for example, when you're adding a new monster or when you add new strictures to the data. So you go to change it and you go here like, I want to change this a little, I want to go here, and then you tab through it and you don't change it and nothing's showing up. So you think it's fine, but then when you hit save, it's like, oh, there are errors that it didn't tell you about, and now they finally show up. So what we want to do is show the errors on blur. We'll use the onblur event, and then when we're blurring, we'll use an action, and we'll call validateProperty. That's an action we'll still have to create, and we'll call it with the change set and the property. So this will check the validations for that property on the change set. And of course, we'll have to create this in our ValidatedInput component. So we're taking in the change set and the property, and then we're just returning, calling change set dot validate for that specific property. This is something that comes with ember-changeset-validations. Now let's test that out. When we blur out of it, it shows us that error. So there we go. There is our nice ValidatedInput component. I hope you'll join me in the next video where we discuss more possible validations, as well as how to create your own validations.